Guitar Business Radio is the podcast for the business of guitar, where you'll always get no reviews, no demos, and no idle chatter. From players to CEOs and in between. If you have a professional or business connection to the world of guitar, this show is your window to insight and information you won't get anywhere else. I'm Jeffrey D. Brown, and I approve this message. So let's get to it. From Guitar Business Media, welcome to episode 60 of GBR. You may have noticed that today's show is titled a bit differently because it is just a bit different. And once again, this is an off week for us, but I've made a commitment to produce and deliver a weekly show, so here we are in our short format, which, to be honest, I actually enjoy doing a lot. It's fun to break out of the routine once in a while and do something creative and out of the ordinary, which I guess kind of describes my personality a little. But of course, our regular show is what we're known for. That will continue to be the norm with great interviews and the usual commentary. And we have some great guests lined up for future shows. But from time to time, like I said a few weeks back, we have to take a break for any one of a substantial number of possible reasons. And I certainly wouldn't want to bore you with all those, but things have gotten pretty busy around here, and we're starting to reach the point where we're probably going to have to reach out for some help, ultimately to help get everything done. So not a bad problem to have. In fact, that has a little something to do with why I titled this show, Guitars and Gratitude. So I've done all these interviews with some really incredibly interesting people, and as I'm sure most of you know, ad nauseum, that I always open the interview with a so-called foundational question. In other words, typically, what are some of the things in the early part of your life that had the most impact or influence on how you got to where you are today? Now, I would not be truthful with you if I said I had not on more than one occasion hypothetically asked myself that particular question, wondering how I might answer it. So in putting this quick little show together, I figured inasmuch as me being interviewed by someone else may not be on the horizon anytime soon, that I would, from time to time, answer a few questions for the fun of it and to add something else to the mix. So with that in mind, let's try something completely different. Well, you know, I started my first guitar-related business just out of high school in the beginning of the 70s. Don't do the math, but I'm still a young guy. It was a little publication called Music Search. Now, I think someone else used that name later on, and there was never any litigation or anything because by then I wasn't doing it anymore. But I do remember typing out copy on a typewriter and pasting it up on boards and taking it to a local copy shop, having those sheets printed on 20-pound goldenrod colored paper. You remember that? And then hand stapling the sheets together. I mean, it was pretty amateurish, but what I did was I put some classified ads in the LA Times and some other newspapers telling folks to send $1 to my P.O. box and we'd send them a copy. Of course, postage in those days was like, I don't know, a nickel maybe, if that. And this thing clearly was not a big moneymaker, obviously. But I kind of got the bug, and I'm sure that had an influence on my publishing career later on. Interestingly enough, not long ago, I was going through some boxes of really old stuff, and I came across some fairly well-preserved copies of my original Music Search publication. It was not very impressive, but putting it in perspective, well, I got a smile out of it, and I gave it a well-deserved nod. Later on in my life, I got to be a publisher of real magazines for many years, and from time to time, I would think back about that very rudimentary publication, and I felt kind of fortunate in a way to have had that experience so early on. I'm sure it made a difference. I knew there was a connection, but I had not quite gotten to the point then where I understood that I should be robustly grateful for that cheesy little stapled together pamphlet. But I am today, as I am for many things in my life. And you know, there's always a little temptation to want to say something like, gee, it would have been great if I had appreciated it earlier. But the only thing we really can do is appreciate it now. And that's really all we have, right? The here and now. so make the most of it. And I don't remember if I told this story here before, at least in any detail. I don't think so. But a bit earlier, when I was a teenager, my dad was in radio. He got into it later in life, in his 40s. He had an opportunity to change careers or something and got some kind of financial assistance to attend the rather famous Don Martin School of Radio and Television Arts and Sciences. Mostly, I think they just called it the Don Martin School, but I think it was the place to go for many years and had been around like forever. You can Google it. There's some pretty interesting stuff about it. Now, we lived in Orange County, and I still do, only closer to the beach. And I remember he'd get up early every morning and make the drive all the way up to Hollywood to go to the school. I think it was for the better part of a year or so, but he really, really loved it. And while he was there, he made a good friend, this kid who was in like his early 20s, I believe, at the time. And my dad would come home and, he'd talk about his day, and he'd always have something to say about his friend. He'd say, this kid, Imus, he's going to go places. You watch. Of course, the rest is history. Don Imus did go places. My dad, on the other hand, only spent a few years actually working in radio after he graduated. He just couldn't make enough money at it at that point in his life, but I know it was the thing he loved doing the most in his career. I always knew that if somehow he could have done that even moderately successfully, he probably would have lived a lot longer. Nonetheless, I was definitely influenced by all that. And in my senior year of high school, I scrapped 9 or 10 years of childhood devotion to becoming an architect and decided to switch colleges at the last minute and major in broadcasting. So after doing a lot of radio in school and upon finishing college, for me, it was time to go out and get a real job. Only then did it sink in that I was going to have to move away to some small town in the middle of nowhere and make pretty much no money for as long as it took, which might be never. So at 23, I made the executive decision to make some real money for a while, and then I would come back to radio. I would come back. Now, at the end of the 70s, as it turned out, after I had bounced around doing a variety of things, I ended up joining my old college roommate and lifelong friend, Leon White, and a few others to build a successful guitar-related publishing company, which we ultimately sold, and that led to a long career for me in publishing, media, design, events, all related stuff. Obviously, it's a much longer story, which I'll put off for some other time or venue, but suffice to say, there was still something I had not done. I said I would come back to radio, and that while that thought never left me completely, I had a career and a family and all those priorities. A lot of things changed over the next 40 years, but I did eventually make it back. And that has a lot to do with why I started Guitar Business Radio. It's probably why there are still some remnants of old school style in the show, which I'm okay with for reasons I've hammered on week after week, like no idle chatter for one thing, and the overall feel of the show. But that's who I am. So doing the show is important for me for a lot of reasons. It's good for business in various ways. It's a lot of fun to do, except for the job of booking guests on the show. I'd like to give that gig to someone else, but so far I haven't found anyone, although I'm definitely open to it, as I said before. But I suppose the biggest reason I do this is because it's something I always wanted to do, but never found a way to do until now. So while I'm very grateful to each of you who choose to listen to GBR and occasionally express a positive opinion on it, my gratitude extends far back to my dad sharing his experience with me and going through all of that with him. I often thought about reaching out to Imus and sending him a photo I have of my dad sitting at the console at the Don Martin School to see if he remembers him. I may still do that. It was a long time ago, but why not? So what did you think of today's show or anything else GBR related? We always want to hear from you, and you can do that easily through our official episode page on our website at guitarbusinessradio.com or on Facebook and Twitter at Guitar Business, or you can email us directly at contact@guitarbusinessradio.com. And of course, if none of that works for you, just call us on our GBR hotline at 888-777-2404. You can do that right now if you like, or later. Operators are busy changing the world, so please call them before they get too serious. Well, I can't comment on today's interview because there wasn't one in the traditional sense. But like I said at the beginning of the show, I do enjoy doing these non-traditional episodes now and then. I'm working on another podcast, not guitar related, that will premiere, I think, around the beginning of the summer. It's called The 14th Way, and will definitely be something completely different. I'll let you know. You can count on that. Well, in the meantime, I hope you'll keep an eye on some of our other commercial activities like Guitar PR, our new spin-off podcast, GBR Focus, and the Guitar Business Store, just to name a few. You know, we work with guitar-related companies to help them increase sales, improve message clarity, sharpen their focus, and, well, grow their business. If you'd like some more information on any of that, just reach out and we shall respond. Finally, circling back to the title of the episode, Guitars and Gratitude. Is there a connection between the two? Well, I would certainly be grateful for another guitar. I would be grateful for more listeners to GBR. I would be grateful for more business for our business. But truthfully, I've learned to practice ongoing gratitude throughout the day, every day, for anything positive that happens. Anything. And I've said this before, there's always way more positive things happening than negative things. Always. Some days I'll just make lists as the day goes on of all the positive things that happen, no matter whether they're large or tiny. It's amazing how they add up. It does several things. It reminds me of how good things really are. But even more importantly, it gives me an all-important opportunity to express my gratitude for each of those things. Now, I know there's a lot of you who understand the internal power of things like gratitude, forgiveness, and the like. If not, I would certainly encourage you to think about it. And while you're doing that, please remember to stay positive, stay focused on your destination, and keep all your options open on how you're going to get there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week on episode 61. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.